of what people, the whole essence, the several laws, and points them out, one I want to spend the most time on. You've heard that it was said by them, they for both parties, the act. Don't just stop short of the act. Look at what your motivation is behind that. Whether adultery is physical or spiritual way, there's a divided. That's what God was getting at. Anywhere you are, or cheat in various, it's no way to live, and that's what God cares about. Another one here is in let him give her a writing of divorcement. But I say unto you that whosoever shall put away his wife, saving for the cause of fornication, causes her. That they struggle with. What do we do with? When we deal with, it's going to happen. It's just life. Let's accept it. God can forgive, and so on. But is that really what Jesus is saying here? The question has been raised already, so when a couple just can't love each anymore, us to live in misery. But I think pre-decided that commitment in marriage is important, and we want to look at why. I have some suggestions on that, but it's obvious that God, if we approach it from that angle, and now we say love is gone, is there a way to recover that and pursue that? The numbers don't speak well for second and third marriages. If you've seen any of those numbers, they're less likely to last than the first marriage. I realize sometimes people have learned to start compromising on that. We do ourselves and others a disfavor. So, this is an option. We will be less likely to pursue how to rekindle that love. There are amazing stories of people that have rekindled love. And so why is divorce wrong? Jesus made it very clear, here it is. Is there a principle behind that Jesus was getting at? I'm going to say the better way. So when we, that's right. But what's underneath that? Church and Christ's always be there. You can, that is puts a black mark on God's type of his love to Christ. It's that reciprocal relationship, that one and only. It's over. I'm divorcing my bride. There's no more hope. It's done. It's over. You go look out for yourself. Go find yourself another husband. I'm tired of all your monkey business. Will God do that? No. He will never do that. I have never gone to bed at night worried that God is going to turn his back on me. So how can we do any less in our marriages? Our marriages should be a way of come to. It inspires me to think about it in that way. So instead of feeling bound by the law of marriage, we should thank God for this. Recognize there's the reality. Sadly, there are times that emotional divorce happens and people live in the same house, but they're emotionally divorced. I have no condemnation. I care. Just now comes to my mind a couple that has struggled for a number of years. I see a little glimmer of hope. Someone that we know from a distance, both grew up in Mennonite homes, but they've had a lot of trouble, and They've experienced so much pain, but I believe there's redemption there. God has a better way. God wants us to experience the best way. Now, let's move on to the last part of the chapter. There's where I want to spend my time. Verse 38. It's the passage that we use as the bait. Will sue thee at the law, and take away thy coat, let him have thy cloak also. Whosoever shall compel thee to go a mile, go with him twain. Give to him that asketh thee, and from him that would borrow of thee turn not thou away. Ye have heard that it has been said, Thou shalt love thy neighbor and hate thine enemy. But I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you, that ye may be the children of your Father which is in heaven. For he maketh his sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and sendeth rain on the just and on the unjust. For if ye love them which love you, what reward have ye? Do not even the publicans the same? And if ye salute your brethren only, what do ye more than others? Do not even the publicans so? Be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father which is in heaven is perfect. Okay, what do you make of what Jesus is teaching here? This has been controversial with various people, misunderstood and misapplied, I think. But again, let's approach this from the perspective that God has good in mind for us. God does not ask us to do something that is not for our good. Does that make sense? So Jesus is doing another one of these. The law has said this, but I say to you. He's simply saying the law had a purpose, but that was only part of it. I'm saying there's a reason underneath that law that was in place. I'm not throwing away the law. There's a purpose here. There's a better way. And I want to help you see that. He says, don't resist evil, but whosoever shall smite thee on thy right cheek, turn to him the other also. How do we do that? That's not what our human nature tells us to do. Now, I don't think Jesus was saying here that justice doesn't matter. I'm going to say right at the foundation of this, we're dealing with justice. If something's not right, it's not right. And Jesus wasn't saying, now all of a sudden people can do anything they want and it's right. That there is a greater power than resisting evil and trying to eat. And then that brings a notch more. But what is accomplished in people that are frustrated about the leaked emails that from the Roe versus Wade issue and the drama that's causing, the even burning buildings and graffiti on churches and pregnancy centers. Everyone has to do a little bit more to react. But what's the win in a situation like that? Nothing. A lot of harm and more polarization in opinions. So, again, Jesus isn't saying justice doesn't matter. Just to that, there's a power in surrender. He's not saying just lie down and be a doormat and have nothing to say. I believe there's a place for accountability. Say, for instance, apply this in maybe a business situation where someone is trying to take advantage of you. You've made an agreement, maybe building a house, and there's disagreements about how everything went down, what the agreement was, taking to court and some of those things, resisting, don't resist. If you know someone is deliberately out to take advantage of you, there's a better way than that. And that's what I call the power of surrender. He goes on to say there in verse 40 about suing, taking your coat and so on, going the extra mile. Look at what you can do to bless the other person out of love and goodwill, not with the hope that he really feels guilty now. Leave that in God's hands. But actually show goodwill to the other person. Many times you will find that the person that is out to take advantage of you has pain in his heart, and he's just trying to survive. He's looking for something better, and if he can get $1 or take advantage in some way, that will give him a little bit of a boost maybe, but then he'll feel guilty again. If we can, instead of reacting to that, do something out of goodwill and blessing, you'd be surprised how many people you will minister to in that way. I'm just convinced that Jesus was helping us understand there's a better way than taking legal action and getting the last dollar out of this that we can and missing the opportunity to maybe help another hurting person. There's a man in our community, just comes to my mind now. He's made a lot of money. He's a pretty rich farmer. He has done things his way, but he has made a lot of enemies. One of the brothers from our church has recently had some opportunity to have interaction with him, and he has admitted, I have chased so many people away in my life. When this brother comes to he's bought corn from him, and he comes to his place, he will just stand there and talk for a long time. He says, I don't have any friends. And I'm sad about what I've done. But he knows how to fight with people to get the best end of the deal. Just an example of what I'm saying. Sometimes the people that are willing to put up a fight are actually hurting people. So no, we don't need to be a doormat. There's a way to hold people accountable, but let's do it with love and integrity. So, typically break stuff or maybe don't bring it back. I don't know what to say about that. But I do know that even in that, there's a lot dependent on my attitude about that. There are times that it's appropriate, again, back to the accountability thing. If you have a piece of equipment that you're aware maybe the person wanting to borrow it isn't that familiar operating, offer to go do it for him. I loan my skid loader out at times, but there's times I've offered to go do something for somebody else. There's nothing wrong with that. That's more what I'm talking about, responsibility, accountability, and that type of thing. You don't have to just knowingly destroy the goods that God has given you. So if you understand what I'm saying, when I'm at peace with God and I love God, love my neighbor, I'm not worried about loaning something out. Maybe it does come back broken. I don't have to have justice for every little thing. I've had things come back broken. There's times I've talked with the individual. But when we're free in our heart, we can have those conversations. We don't have to just be on edge all the time. Just a few pointers there for whatever it's worth. Verse 43, now we're getting into some of the nitty-gritty of love and non-resistance. Jesus says, you've heard that it's been said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. Some people say it's every Christian's responsibility to carry a gun, protect your family. You're in town or wherever, and he said, I think that's my God-given calling. And this young man grew up in a Mennonite home. I don't agree with him. I think there's a better way. I think we should care about our families. I think we should protect them. That's part of our, as husbands, our responsibility. What do you think about guns? I've done some studying on that. I've taught a couple of youth Bible studies on the subject, and I did some research. And again, I don't know, maybe it's NRA that put this research together. I'm not even sure. It's been a few years since I've done it. But when I see the numbers, I'm more convinced that I'm safer without a gun than the person that carries a gun. I felt that way for a long time. Now, but I'm more convinced after I did the study, not just this is totally secular, nothing Bible-based. There was some research done with to see how people are feeling that have actually pulled the trigger. They found it's hard to get anybody to answer the questions. Most people that have actually, well, they say, I think it's less than 1% of people that carry a gun that actually pull the trigger. So I'm thinking, what sense does that make? I'm going to carry a gun and make the criminal more suspicious of me. If it's concealed, they probably won't know. But I'm making myself more a target if I'm carrying a gun. If 1% or less ever pull the trigger, what good does a gun do? And those that do have lots of regrets. I read a couple stories of people that do that. The one man said, I ask God every day to forgive me for killing that 19-year-old young man. He had a 19-year-old young son himself. And what if that would have been my son? I just have not found any good place. Most times, a civilian carrying a gun to try to stop it will escalate the situation. That's differentiating civilian versus law enforcement. Civilian carrying a gun usually escalates the situation instead of de-escalating. So there again, I'm like, doesn't even compute. But now let's look at verse 44. He says, but I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you. Is this verse passive or active? I'll take a response from anyone. See, the natural tendency is to think that nonviolence, non-resistance, and all this is passive. We just let anything happen. Is this verse passive or active? There's 4 words that he uses in that verse that are significant. Active, very much. Love. There has to be some expression, some way to respond, and he's saying love, bless. That has to be an active way to interact with people and be out there doing good. By the way, I know this is not enemies, but I saw some pallets outside here. I'm supposing you distribute some food. Get engaged. Do something. Let people know that you love them and care for them. Do good. That's the other one that's mentioned there. And pray for. Another way to get involved. God answers prayer. Time praying is not wasted. So these are 4 very specific ways to engage and get involved and do good. It's not passive. Jesus is asking us to be active. But back to the thing about carrying guns. What would you do? I've heard this scenario given different times. What would you do if someone broke into your house and threatened your family? That's where people often say, well, there's where you need to have a gun. Keep a gun under your bed or whatever. Well, this is my question I've asked different times. If that threat happens, by the time I run to the bedroom and get the gun, this person could kill my family. If I'm carrying the gun and the person is threatening me with a gun, the moment I reach for my gun, he's again got the advantage over me. So I just do not get the point of a gun. There's thinking of an account where someone approached a house. I think was an older lady was in the house by herself maybe. The young man threatened her. I was amazed at the response. This lady said, just looked the young man in the eye and said, "Put that gun down. We don't do such things. Come on in here. I want to get to know you," or whatever. She served him a meal or whatever. I forget exactly how the story was. Here's what I'm going to say. If we exercise our minds in doing what verse 44 says, doing good and loving and blessing, we will be thinking. We don't necessarily have to plan out what we would do in a difficult situation. But when we exercise our minds in that direction, we will be far better prepared to respond with love and blessing and good than if we constantly are thinking in fearful ways and wishing I could carry a gun and suppose, and do you follow what I'm saying? Pablo Yoder had a couple talks on Zoom a year or so ago, and that was one of the takeaways I took from that. Someone asked, well, what and doing good and blessing other people. That's your best preparation. Another situation, pastor came to church Sunday morning, opened up, had no idea there was somebody in the bathroom. The pastor walked in the bathroom and an armed man was in there. He was running from the law. And just that quick, the pastor pulled his gun out to defend himself. The man grabbed the gun and shot the pastor. There are more situations where a man dies because of his own gun than I was realizing. But at the end of the article it said the pastor was doing what every good Texan should do, carry a gun. I'm sorry, but it just, as I study some of those things, they make less sense to me, and I'm convinced God has the better way. Love your enemies, do good, and bless and pray for. That, we minimize that opportunity way too much. There is so much there. Thinking of Peter, Jesus told Peter to put up his sword. Well, was that for Peter's sake or for the soldier? I think it was for both. The golden rule says, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And again, is that passive or active? See, I used to think of it in reverse, and there's actually a lot of religions that have a form of the golden rule, but it's in reverse. Don't do anything to someone else that you wouldn't want them to do to you. That is not what Jesus said. He said, not necessarily hoping that others will do that to us. If they do, fine. If not, I have my affirmation from God. I don't need other people to affirm me so I don't go down in despair. But that's been a real challenge to me. A situation a number of years ago that took place that I just was passive, inactive, didn't do anything, and later this came to my mind, well, no, Jesus said, get involved. So I have a lot to learn in that. So verse 45, he goes on to say that ye may saying, this is how God himself operates, with love and goodwill. Notice what he says in the last part of verse 45. For he makes his sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and on the unjust. Still continues to send rain and sunshine and blessing. Just what he's simply saying, those daily blessings. What would we do if one morning the sun wouldn't come up? All day the sun wouldn't come up. And he's saying one another. That's so amazing to me. God doesn't withhold his daily goodness to us just because we don't in our daily hard to convince other people, and don't allow God's Spirit to work in other people's lives through that. That's not my desire. I want this non-resistance thing on the military level. It's in our daily relational level where we're tested. Verse 46 and 47, if you love them which love you, what reward have ye? Do not even the publicans the same? For if ye salute your brethren only, what do ye more than others? Do not even the publicans the same? Very good question. That's not the way to live, to isolate yourself and stay away from people that relate to. But I'm thinking of a man that he's a very knowledgeable man. He considers himself a Christian, he's gone to seminary. He can tell you all the Greek and Hebrew meanings of, he has basically no friends. Discouraged man, broke what Jesus is teaching. Explain scriptures. God knows what's good for you and what's best. And stew and care. Romans 12 verse equal the score, he says, but is in control, and he doesn't have to manipulate that. Therefore, if thine enemy hunger, feed him. That actually wins hearts instead of losing and destroying relationships, can have the power, the Holy Spirit in our lives to live as children of yours. Father, I pray that you would bless this congregation with grace and wisdom and courage. Pray that their lives could represent you as they go about in the community here. I pray that the power and the love of Jesus can be seen in these people's lives and can draw men